welcome once again to Rise of the GM, where today we're going to be looking at the idea of an astral prison. We're going to be talking about a con artist, but we're going to be spending time talking about RPGs with kids with a special co-host here on Rise of the GM. Well, it is good to be here today. We have a special co-host with us today, Nicole Griffith, right? Nicole, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and what you're all about, and where you're from and all that stuff. And then we'll kind of jump into the rest of this episode. So, Nicole.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here for the chat today. My name's Nicole, and I am a mom of two little kids. They're both under 5, so it is chaos in my life most of the time.
Yep.
I am fairly new to the tabletop role-playing game scene. I've been playing for maybe about 3 years now, so still fairly fresh, but I love it. I got a little bit and wanted to go back for more. So primarily I am a game master for kids games, my kids and my kids' friends, and I love doing that. I don't know that I have the courage to be a game master for adults. I haven't actually tried that yet, but the kids thing is fun.
Yeah.
And right now, my big project is I'm writing a children's fantasy book and a children's tabletop role-playing game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And we want
trying to get
make
kids
sure
into the nerddom early.
Yeah.
That's right. Get them there quick. And just so everybody knows, she didn't dress up especially for us today. This is how she dresses every day, right?
This is my life. I just bring the fantasy into the everyday.
That's awesome.
Right. But yeah, no, she had, you had some other stuff recording, doing some stuff, and happy circumstance. You get to be dressed up for what we're doing today.
Awesome.
So, well, we are going to enjoy getting to talk about that. And we're going to make sure that all of you out there watching have information about the book that she has coming out and the system, or the RPG stuff and all of that toward the end of this episode. We're going to start the way we always do, and we're going to let Nicole just jump in with us here and add where she sees fit. But we always like to start with an encounter that we would just discuss, so that if you're looking for something to drop into your campaign, we want you to have some ideas to get you started. We're going to discuss one and then talk about how we might adapt that as GMs or GMs, even for kids here. And I'm going to start that today. And this one's called The Cloud Fortress. So again, these are all from, there's a book by Gnome Stew, right? Who writes that book? It's called Eureka 501 Adventure Starters. We just kind of pick one of these each week and go through it. This one's called Cloud Fortress. While resting in a town at the conclusion of an adventure, your PCs hear a commotion in the town square. And when they go out to investigate, they see this fortress floating in the sky. Now, obviously, this had to have just appeared because it wasn't there just a moment ago, right? And upon entering the fortress, so somehow they got to get up there to it, they find out it's not empty. Rather, it's full of all manner of extraplanar and elemental creatures. And they seem focused on the center, the keep at the center of this place. And they're taking turns attacking that, right? So the keep looks battered. It seems to be defended by a force of equally battered humans. And the humans spot the PCs somehow and motion for them to come inside. I don't know how exactly that would work here because they're in the middle of being assaulted. But somehow they let them into the keep. The humans then explain to the PCs that this structure is a prison and that it was anchored in the astral plane until one of the creatures, I'm assuming one of the creatures that was in the prison, but maybe it was one outside, unraveled the ritual magic that was holding it there, setting it adrift. The creatures inside can't exit the prison because the humans have in place a series of wards that are holding them within the building. The only way for them to escape is to incapacitate the humans in some sense and dispel the wards, setting them loose upon the PC's world, which nobody wants. So the humans are badly wounded. They've lost too many to both keep the ritual going that they're creating and also to defend this place, right? To make this new anchor and to defend it. The PCs can help by taking over fortifications, keeping and holding off the attacking creatures. The creatures, it says here, will attack in waves, beginning with groups of like creatures and then desperately banding together for a final all-out assault at the end. And the meat of this adventure is the siege of that prison's inner keep that you're defending, right? The magic ritual can take as long as you need it to as a GM to keep things tense for your PCs. And there should be several waves of attackers before the final wave. Use all of their abilities of those imprisoned creatures, from mesmerizing people to tunneling under the walls, flying, whatever elemental magic they have, whatever it is. And then provide a stockpile of supplies and varying number of defenders available to help the PCs to allow you to easily scale this up or down as you need to. So an interesting one. I think what I like about this one is all of the elemental and the extra planar type stuff you can bring into it. I think you're going to have to fill in some stuff as a GM here as far as like how exactly do you get them in? And then what exactly does it look like as those attacks happen, and what's going to happen at the end after this is all finished? If they get the ritual, I think it said, maybe I didn't read it, but like the prison will go back to the astral plane, and then you'll just kind of be teleported right out to the city. But I think it could be interesting. What's hard for me in this one is that they're going to have waves of like attackers. It almost feels like those old fighting movies where, the good guy's standing there and then like, a couple people come at him and let him fight him. And then a couple more come instead of just all coming at once. It's like, why come in waves? But maybe that's something that you can make seem a little less wave-ish if you're the GM. But what do you guys think of an encounter like this? And how would you, if you were going to adapt this to a game or to playing with kids, how might you use something like this, or would you?
Yeah. You have any initial thoughts, Nicole?
I don't know. I don't know why I keep picturing, like, I don't know if anybody played that video game Destiny. It was like, it was really hot a few years back. That's what this reminds me of. It's just like wave after wave of these like creatures.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it's maybe a little too tense for the players that I usually play with. I could see like maybe throwing something like this, but more of like a less high stakes version. Like maybe instead of, the elemental creatures, maybe it's like animals or something like that.
Right, yeah.
And I definitely would give them a lot of interesting allies because kids love having NPC allies, especially if they're like humanoid animals. So I'd probably change like it's not all humans. There's some like animated cats and foxes and stuff too.
Yeah.
Just keeps it whimsical.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think it depends some, at least for me. I have a son and a daughter. If I'm playing with my son, he loves like fire and like tornado winds and stuff like that. And my daughter is more like, it's like a cat looking animal that comes after it, or it's like a dragon that's purple and and she likes that kind of stuff. But I think for me, if I were doing this with kids, first of all, I would make it more of not the elementals trying to get in and kill anybody, but they have to get in. They're going to get in and like cage the people so that they can all touch this orb, which lets everybody go. Make it something very easy for them to understand instead of like keep this ritual from happening. They wouldn't understand. Right. But like if 4 of the elementals can touch this orb, then it's going to be bad. So how do you keep that from happening?
Yeah. I think the more we do these, the more critical I'm getting of the writing in these and like the holes that are in them. So I need to watch that. But my initial thought is like, okay, it immediately says like once they're up there, and I'm like, this thing's floating in the air. How did they get up? How did they even get there? And but as we're like talking about this, I almost wonder about like a Jack and the Beanstalk situation where, it's like this thing that there's like a climbing, there's even maybe some encounters that can happen as they go up that, but then you get into this place where these creatures are doing this to just like even make that. I don't even think that would be just kids for me, but it was like, I like that idea personally as a player too, of having to deal with that, but bringing that whimsy into it and something even that maybe it's like, oh, here's a story that we can relate to because we've heard it before, but it's just in a different way kind of thing. I think could be really, really fun to do that.
I also think if I were doing this with my kids, especially, it wouldn't be like waves and waves. I think you get too many creatures, it gets really hard for kids. I think I would probably have 2 or 3. Like maybe a couple can come at once, and so maybe it would be just a little more, but it would probably be a lot less if I were doing this with guys at our normal gaming table. Yeah, you can have waves of creatures because you can throw out 3 or 4 or 5 different of this kind of elemental, and then this kind of elemental, and then whoever doesn't get in our more adult games, whoever doesn't get killed runs off at a certain point, and then all of those that ran off make this final wave push, and that's that whole disparate, all together, which I don't know how I would explain that. The idea that because evidently I was having a little bit of a hard time understanding exactly how this worked, because it's this huge building that they can't escape. They're all attacking the very center, which is the keep where this ritual's going on. But they're all there attacking from the outside, but they only come like one type at a time. That didn't make sense. So I'd have to think about this as a GM. And every time you're a GM, you do this. You take something somebody said, hey, here's an idea. And you're like, this would make sense for me. This would not make sense for me. Here's how I would adapt that. And and so with my kids, it would probably be scaled back. And it would be, there probably wouldn't be this idea of a final push. It would be, a few things come in, and you have to do something to incapacitate these so that the orb can be charged or whatever it is I decide. Yeah.
Do you two think that, so the very end of this is like, oh, it got fixed, it goes back, and you are suddenly on the ground. Would it be more interesting for that to be, and again, it kind of depends on your table, I'm sure, but you have to figure out how to get away from this thing before it zoops you over to the new plane, of existence. Like, is that too much to add into this after all of that, or does it add an element that would be more fun?
I don't know.
I'm concerned that my players are going to want to go with it. Like, they're going to be like, and I tried to jump on and hang on to it, so I can go too.
And I don't think that's just your players. I think I would have that concern with a bunch of guys too. They're like, I want to go with this wherever it's going.
Let's rewrite the campaign.
There,
And maybe, again, so these are encounter starters. They give you an idea. You can take them and go however you want. If you feel like, this could be a really cool bridge to an astral place, to a place that has kind of creatures you wouldn't necessarily see in the material plane, that's a great place to take it. But you have to have kind of planned, how's that going to look once we get to there? The other thing I thought of is it would be interesting more than just like, I'm assuming this is a prison of like super bad guys. It's kind of like the equivalent of Arkham Asylum for Batman people. They're like super villains. They're just not regular people in a prison, right? If you're in this astral prison that's like anchored somewhere in another place that has gotten free, this is like super creatures. And so could one of them be a recurring character? Could one of them become like part of where the campaign goes? And again, this is depending if this is a single shot or if this is something you want to weave in as far as like, I've got a campaign that's going to be longer and there's going to be this one bad guy they keep chasing. Well, maybe that's one person that was in this prison and maybe one guy gets out before you help solidify everything. And then that guy becomes the one you're chasing or the one you're trying to stop for the rest of the campaign. That kind of thing can happen in a place that's the, super bad guys. Of whatever that looks like. So interesting ideas here. Hopefully, sometimes we don't always have great ideas for this is how I would do it on here, but you hear this and you're like, I can take and use this in some way. And hopefully this is one that might fall into that category for you. But I want to kind of move this on because I keep trying to hold back from doing it now. And I kind of get into this idea of when you're doing RPG stuff with kids. And that's why we have Nicole on here today. So I'm going to let Adam kind of kick off this section of the podcast here. And we're going to talk about this for a bit.
Yeah. So thanks again, Nicole, for coming on today and being a part of this. I'm super excited. Like Matthew said, he's got kids. I have kids. I think we've both like dabbled in playing, there's certain times when like, we want to play, and it's like, okay, we'll figure something out, here, but it's been very minimal on my part, at least, being able to do that. And I came in, like, started like seeing you on Instagram, kind of at the beginning of your like things I don't do with kids kind of
Okay.
series that you had. Like I think it was one of the first couple that you had put up, and like was just like, this is awesome to like think through these things and how to like engage with them on a different level kind of thing. And like, I guess just like to start out, like what was your kind of like start with TTRPGs, and then how did that lead into the point where it's like, I want to do this with my kids or with other kids?
Yeah, so some of my nerdy friends have been trying to get my husband and I to play a
Mm,
D&D campaign with them for like years.
mm,
And we finally decided to do it, I guess about maybe 3.5 years ago now. We started playing together and we were
yeah,
playing virtually. They don't live close to us, so it
mm,
would be like my husband and I in one room, on Zoom with
yeah, yeah.
them in another room, and then my friend who was the DM
Mhm.
was in the other room. So it was great. Like I said, I got hooked. I
Yeah.
wanted more. I want to play all the time. But really, what happened to bring the kids into it is our daughter, who was 3 at the time, no, 2, anyway, little at
Mhm.
the time, she would oftentimes sneak out of her room at night after we had put her to bed, and she'd see us playing
Uh-huh.
D&D with all, our characters and our paperwork and our books and our
Yep.
dice, and she was like, what are you playing?
Right.
And I want to play too. And I guess it just kind of went from there, that like
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is a fun thing that I enjoy. Our kids are already really into like fantasy and Renaissance
Mhm.
festivals and that kind of stuff because that's what we do. So we just
Yeah, yeah, right.
bring them along,
Mhm.
you know. And so I was like, I bet they'd be really into playing if I could just like dumb it down enough
Mm,
where it wasn't overwhelming for them.
right.
And
Yeah.
so I looked into, a lot of existing resources that if you look hard enough, there actually are pretty good
Mm.
tabletop role playing games for kids.
Oh, cool.
Um, None of them are like advertised super well, so you have
Hmm.
to do a little bit of digging
Right.
to
Yeah,
find them.
yeah, right.
But I just kind of took like bits and pieces of all of those and made one that I thought would work for our family, and then started sharing it on Instagram, and it kind of ballooned from there.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about like your kids watch what you do. So when I was a kid, I'm older. When I was a kid, we didn't have like, so my parents would play Monopoly, and I would sneak out at night and I'd watch it. I'm like, man, that looks so
Mhm.
fun. I want to play now. Like, go back to bed. This is an adult game, Monopoly. We're dealing with money and renting and stuff like that. But it really was something that just seemed so exciting to me. And now I have a son, and he watches. So it used to be all the guys would come to my house and we would play, and that's since COVID, there's been a lot more online stuff, and
Yeah.
now it's kind of mixed, but he just thought it was the greatest thing ever. My
Mhm.
daughter too, but my son is constantly like, "Dad, let's play a game night tonight." Because I did that thing where having no resources, I'm like, "Okay, I'll try to do something for you." And so I just
Yeah, yeah.
came up with like a scenario, and I gave my kids really simple stats: speed, strength, and smart. They had three. They all started with S: speed, strength, and smart, and they would either get a +1, +2, or +3. They could choose which one went where, and then they would roll a
Yeah.
D6 and add that. So it was super simple because I didn't want
Yeah.
them having to think about a lot of math because they were like super young. And although it's been good for math, my son will
Yeah,
do math when it's trying to
for
figure
sure.
out a die roll where he would not want to do it in other venues. But it was that idea of he just thought it was the greatest thing in the world because he saw us doing it. And he wants to do it more than I have time to do it, really.
Yeah,
They
right.
want to do it all the time.
Mhm.
So I love that, the way that it started and then where it went for you with what you're doing.
For sure. So kind of just talking about you a little bit, Nicole. I had or we a while ago had talked about this like 8 types of fun. And when you like kind of look at your playing or your GMing for your kids, like, are there any that you specifically feel like you kind of resonate with more? Trying to pull the list up here. Sensation,
Yeah.
fantasy. I don't know if you have that
Yes,
list, maybe.
I do. I have the
Yeah.
list. I'm looking at it. I did my homework, Adam.
Oh, thank you.
Um, yeah, I think all of them, of course, like it's a
Mm,
spectrum, right? But I
right.
think for me, the things that I'm focusing on when I'm playing with my kids, mostly like the fellowship and the sensation pieces,
Yeah. Yeah.
because really, like at the end of the day, my goal is always like, let's just get together and have a fun time.
Mm,
If
yeah.
we're not having a fun time for one reason or another, we walk away and go do something else
Right.
because it's
Mhm.
not worth the battle.
Yeah.
And the whole point is just for us to get together as a family or as a friend group
Mhm.
and do something that we all enjoy, have a laugh, get creative,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
For
So that
sure.
fellowship's definitely number one. And
Mhm.
then I think the sensation piece, I don't know if it's because I mostly run games for kids or if maybe this is just like how I am as
Mm,
a player and then how I am as a game master as a result.
right.
But I love like seeing the things, smelling the things, having the
Mhm.
menu from the tavern, having the miniatures to move around the map. Like,
Yeah.
I love that. I think
For sure.
that just really adds to the immersion and kind of like the fantasy aspect of it.
Mhm.
And I think kids
Absolutely.
lean naturally toward that, don't they? Because like when
Mhm.
I first started, I would like explain, like kind of doing theater of the mind, which they love storytelling and they love me telling them, this is what's happening. But
Mm,
I found out very quickly that I didn't even have to have minis, which my son think are awesome. But like we could go and grab their toys. Have you heard of these
Yeah.
Schleich? I don't know if you've all heard of Schleich, but they have like
mm.
fantasy series and Elder Door series. So they have these big rock guys and flame guys and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
frost giants, and then they also have dragons and elves and stuff. And we would grab stuff from their room and put it in there, and they would just grab it and move it around, and they would have
Yeah.
all these theories of how they were going to be so awesome and amazing in the game. But yeah.
For sure.
Mhm.
So kind of connected to that, we also at one point had talked about on the podcast, like hats that, GMs wear, the entertainer or the storyteller or the facilitator. Do you feel like there's kind of a way you lean in that way, or like, again, when you're running games for your kids, any of those that come out a little more?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always want to be more the entertainer
Hmm.
because again, it's just about like having a fun time
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being silly together.
Right.
But definitely with the more kids that are at the table together, or even, a lot of times we do like a mixed kids and adults
Hmm.
group. So adults, I guess, included. I find the more people there are at the table, the more I feel like I have to be in that facilitator role. And it ends
Yeah.
up being like kind of herding cats and
Yeah.
like,
For sure.
Mm.
it's not your turn, or like, oh, you need to do this. And
Mhm.
I don't enjoy that as much, but I do think it's more of like a role that I've had to learn to play
Yeah.
more
For sure.
as as someone who's trying to manage several different ages of
Right.
adults with different attention spans and
Mhm.
skills, and
Yep.
can be a bit of a challenge.
So
Absolutely.
you run games for your kids. Do you run games for your kids' friends with them?
Yes.
Mhm.
That's always interesting. So do they all think you're the cool mom because you do this?
I don't
You're
know.
like, maybe.
I hope I'm the cool mom. I think
Mhm.
maybe I'm the weird mom, but I guess I'm okay with that.
Aren't those
Oh
the
yeah.
same thing? I mean, really?
Yeah. Yeah, last year when my daughter turned 4, we had everybody over, like her school friends and stuff, for a birthday party.
Hmm.
And I let her pick the theme of the party, and she wanted like a fantasy, like Dungeons and Dragons
Nice.
type
Yeah.
party. And I was like, all right, that sounds fun. We're just
Yeah.
gonna bring out all the nerd stuff and like LARPing weapons and costumes and
Uh-huh.
stuff. And like some of the parents were like, what is
What?
going on in this house? I was like, you know what? This is who we are.
Yep. Yep. That's
There
awesome.
you go. Maybe you'll influence some parents too.
Right?
Yeah.
And like, you know,
So
You gotta let it out. You don't need to hide it under something.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's
for
fun.
sure.
It's fun.
So this is like a really big question, and it kind of one of the questions I guess I have is like even like a preferred table size. And I know sometimes I deal with this thing where if people are like, I want to play, then I'm always like, oh yeah, come on, come on, come on, and then you end up with like 8 people around your table, and it's like this is not gonna work, you know. So I know that plays a role when it's like friends are wanting to play and stuff, but that's kind of the smaller question. But the larger question is just like walking through like what does like jamming kids look like on a practical level as you sit down at the table? What are the kind of the things you're looking for? I know that's a really big question, but if you can walk through
Yeah.
that at all. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think like the group size is a big piece of that for
Hmm.
sure. Um, I think my favorite is to have a mixed group of some younger kids plus some either like older kids, like teenage older siblings or other adults,
Mm.
because those older ones will kind of like help the younger ones
Oh yeah.
so that it gives me a little bit more space to be just the game master instead of like the game master and the one that reminds you like, hey, it's your turn. On your turn you
Right.
get to do this and roll this and add this and like
Yeah, yeah,
I
for
mean
sure.
they need reminding if nothing else.
Yeah.
And I'd say ideally maybe like one or two other teens or adults and then
Mm.
like probably like two little kids max.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I'm comfortable with.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
I've seen like I don't know if you guys know the kids table, but they do these live plays that they put on YouTube, and sometimes they have like 5 kids at the table, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, that's
Yeah.
so amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know how you manage that,
Mhm.
but it can be done. It's just the herding cats situation starts
Right.
coming into play again.
Right. Yeah, I liked what you said earlier about like if the fun is starting to like drop off, then it's like, yeah, it's time to do something else. And I think about that some with again the very few times I've played with my kids, like the attention span part too, where it's like I can tell this is waning massively where they're just like walking away from the table and it's like, where are you at? You know, and stuff. And it's like, okay, we can put a pause on this now and walk away. So that's come into play a little bit for me, too. But um
Yeah, the
when you
timing piece is huge. Just trying to
Mhm,
like kind of read the room and figure out where we're at. Like, are we getting
right.
tired? Are we getting hungry? We might need to take a snack
Hmm.
break. And it's just, as the person who's prepping the game, kind of keeping in mind, we may only play for 15 minutes and then everybody may be not having fun and then we're
Mhm.
going to
Right, right,
nap.
right, right. Yeah.
Or they may be really into it that day and super focused and we're going to play for like 2 hours.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So,
That
Yeah,
brings up
generally
a
for me, it is the idea of do I have the time that so if it's my son and his friends, they want to play forever. And
yeah.
forever.
for I have to be like, okay, we're going to stop now. It's been 2.5 hours. But I think one of the things, and maybe you can speak into this, the idea of you have to play a managing role a little bit with, depending on how old they are,
Mm,
with a couple things, at least I've noticed, and maybe you can speak more into if you've seen this, but like with my boys, it's a case of they want to be super awesome. And so they make up things. They're like, oh, on my turn, I jump up, grab my sword, cut 3 of them down, and then, run up and do this and fly over here. And I'm like, okay, now you can only do a few things in your turn. So let's, because they just, I'm awesome. And they want to make up their own magic
mhm,
on the spot and all this kind of stuff. But then also having to manage what happens, the frustration or the feeling of failure if they roll badly. They have this big plan and then they roll and it doesn't work out, and keeping it
mhm,
from becoming like super frustrated and maybe even like upset or like feeling like I just failed everything. And there has to be some, as an adult, you have to like frame a lot of stuff when those situations come up where they had this great idea and it didn't work out. Have you seen anything like that with with your kids, and how do you handle that with them?
Yes. So I a secret that's not really a secret. My day job is that I'm a professional counselor. So
Mhm.
there's this piece inside of me that's like, ooh, what a great opportunity to practice resilience and
Yeah.
like learn how to deal with failures because life is going to throw you failures. So
Right.
let's practice it here in this safe environment. So I personally kind of love those moments because it
Mhm.
just is like this natural sort of teaching moment to work on emotion regulation. But I'm weird like that because of my profession, right?
Right.
I I
But I
think,
think all of us parents doing that for our kids, we want to help teach them that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a life skill you have to have
Right. Right.
because disappointment happens.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, talking points there, definitely like a lot of moments that we've had to pull out of game and like
Mhm.
console. Again, snack breaks work wonders. Maybe
Oh
you just
yeah.
take a little snack break and then you're like, man, that was disappointing. Okay, let's get back and try again.
Right. Right.
Um, I also I have a very generous retry kind of system where
Mhm.
I give out what I call reroll tokens. They're basically inspiration points,
Oh,
Mm.
but
nice.
I call them reroll tokens,
Mhm.
and I give them out very liberally on
Yeah.
purpose. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you searched this little bag on the floor. Here's 6 reroll tokens that were in the bag,
Uh-huh.
so that if it is one of those moments where they get really excited and then they roll a 1, they can use their reroll token if they haven't
Right.
used them all. So then they get this like automatic second chance that is then really exciting for them.
I've done a thing, it's a little bit different than that, but where if they fail, they get a chance to call a friend to be next. And it kind
Mm.
of helps develop this cooperative team thing where
Mhm.
even if that person would have been later in the round, maybe even after the bad guy, they get to call them in to be right next as like teamwork. And
Mm.
so
It's
then
cool.
they feel
I
like
love
part
that.
of, even though I didn't get this, I was successful in helping him get up here to do this. And so that has helped some. But I love that idea of the reroll tokens. I've never done that,
Yeah, that's cool.
but I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
I didn't want to jump too far ahead of like I know like you've kind of started a series on Instagram with like as a therapist what this looks
Mhm.
like. So I don't want to like jump ahead on your content, but would you speak into that a little more on just like how that's kind of playing a role for you since we kind of talked about that. I especially like I watched the like Family Connection one that either went out yesterday or today, and I thought that was really cool to just like see that aspect of like bringing people around the table because that you talked about fellowship earlier and that is a big one for us. We talk about a lot about just like the friendship that's around the table and how that works for like our group of people. So would you speak into that a little more, just like the things you're learning or have learned, I guess, from that kind of point of view?
Yeah, I mean, like for me, it definitely started from that family connection place of
Hmm.
like wanting to do something meaningful away from, TV and screens and stuff like
Yeah.
that with my kids and their friends and our friends. But pretty soon after, like way before I was telling anyone that I was actually secretly a counselor,
Mm.
I started getting like inundated from all these people I was meeting through the tabletop role playing game community that
Mm.
were telling me these stories about like, oh yeah, I used to play with my dad and like now he's
Hmm.
gone and those are the best memories that I
Oh
have
yeah.
of him and like how it made us so much closer or like maybe I had a rough home life, but then my science teacher in middle school had this like
Mm.
D&D club after school, and that's
Right.
where I finally felt like I had a place to fit in.
Hmm.
So, just like that piece, I feel like alone, without any of the other good stuff that can come along with it, that piece
Yeah.
is so huge of just giving people a place where they can be kind of weird and be
Mm.
creative and be
Yeah.
accepted.
Right.
It's it's powerful. It's a
Hmm.
big deal.
Absolutely.
belonging is huge for everybody, not just kids, but for everybody.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. When you sit down at the table, just from like an expectations level, what do you kind of bring to that, like as a GM? You know, I when I'm GMing our game right now that happens on Thursdays, and I have a certain amount of expectation with adult people, like what's coming, and whether that always gets fulfilled or not, it's to be a question. But like, do you feel like there's kind of different expectations you sit down with in that way?
Um, I don't know that they're all that different,
Mm,
actually. I mean, I think maybe the biggest difference is similar to what I was saying earlier about like the being flexible and timing thing. I feel like when I sit down at an adult's game, the expectation is like, okay, we're here, we're all going to be here for the next 2 hours or whatever.
yeah,
And I
4 hours, 6 hours, right?
yeah.
I know it could go on and on and on, right? But I think maybe just having that expectation of like trying to keep the timing really flexible and
Mm,
continue to like read the moods and attention spans
right.
in the room to decipher like, are we still having fun
Yeah.
or should we just pick this back up later?
Mm,
um, I usually way over prep just in case it ends up being one of those
yeah.
great days that people want to play for hours.
Right.
And then, if they only want to play for 20 minutes, I'm like, great, we could do 5 more of these that I already have prepped.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That is a beautiful thing when you're in that place.
Yes.
That was a question I was thinking of earlier, and I kind of forgot. Was just like, what's prep look like for you in that place?
Um, Kind of depends on how much time I have, right?
Uh,
I mean, like y'all are parents, right?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Some weeks you don't have any time.
Right.
And uh, I have a lot of projects going on right now. So recently we've actually been doing a lot more like family game night that doesn't
Yeah.
require
Right.
prep
Yeah, for sure.
because family D&D night is like on hold at the moment
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
mom is too busy to
Yeah.
make a new thing.
Right.
But I like open-ended stuff.
Mm,
Sometimes I will have like a quest or a mission that I try to like
right.
direct them towards, but a lot of times I just kind of like make it up as we go. Like, oh,
Mhm.
you're in this town. There's an inn, there's a tavern, there's a market, there's a fountain. What do you want to look at?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
For sure.
where do you want to go?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've often, like I said, I've raided my kids' toys. So my kids, when they play, it can be crazy. So like my daughter once wanted to be a My Little Pony
Yeah.
character as we went through this thing. So she picked, I don't know, Pinkie Pie. I can't even remember which one it was, but she had that, and my son had some crazy miniature he had, and we're going through, and it's that same idea. I'll just be like, okay, you're going up this mountain path, and rocks start falling and busting out and then I reach over into their toy bin and I pull out this thing and
Yeah.
and it's like, do you have stats for that, Matthew? No, but I'm going to make it fun. They're going to play, and when it feels like if they're starting to get like this is taking too long, then you got it, or maybe it goes out before that. But I very much that same thing where it's kind of by the seat of your pants, what comes up, because a lot of times they'll guide you. At least the kids I play with, they know
Yeah. Yeah.
what
For
they
sure.
want to happen next,
Mhm.
and so sometimes you have to rein them in on that a little bit because it just starts going everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
definitely
my
can.
my middle child just got online and said hello, so I'm excited for him to watch this too. I really like employing the like asking them questions to, because I will say I don't think I've had much of any prep when my boys want to play. It's like, we want to play. I'm like, cool, let's do this thing. And there's a lot of like, okay, you walk into this cave. What do you think you see there? And they're starting to like throw out ideas, and it's like, all right, let's grab onto one of those and go. Has been kind of a cool piece to let them express that creativity too and help like group storytell. I think like they tend to do that a lot more than I see, even though I've employed that some with like adults. I feel like it's a lot easier to get them to like pitch in that way than at the adult table kind of thing. So,
And just as an alternative to that,
Mm.
if you're a guy who is already in your own gaming group or a girl who's already in your own gaming group, and then you also do stuff with kids, don't hesitate to just like whatever the main plot you did in your big group,
oh yeah,
take it, simplify it a lot, and then just throw it out to your kids. You know, obviously it's not going to have all of the crunchy and all of the whatever happened in your big group, but man, I have done that so many times. It's like, oh, this is what we did in our group Thursday. My kids are wanting to play a game. I don't have time for prep. Okay, you guys walk into the Magic College, and this is what you see. You know, whatever we did, they get to do in a simplified version.
For sure.
Yeah, and to that point too, you can also steal, borrow, whatever you want to call it, from fantasy like book series you've read, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. You can even steal from like Disney movie plots. Most of it is a pretty basic hero's journey at the end of the day. Like you can borrow elements from that, and your kids will either recognize it and think that's so cool, or they won't recognize it at all, and they'll be like, wow, you're such a good storyteller.
You're like, yes, I am. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally make
Don't
that
ever
up.
tell your friends this story and said I came up with it, but yes, I am. Yeah, as a GM, I think stealing is, or it's not stealing. That's what this whole community is about, right? As long as you don't try to pass it off as your own later. Every time I run a campaign, Adam's like, hey, I might write that up as a book. I'm like, well, be careful there.
Yeah.
There are several parts of that have come from books I've read, movies I've seen, things that,
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned the like things I don't do as a DM for kids series earlier. And like when you did that, what was kind of the heart behind that? And were there any like specific ones that you feel like are just like your bread and butter for like running? I know they're all important, but that you really stick to?
No, that's a good question. I mean, definitely the like don't stick to the rules, don't get too attached to the rules stuff, I think is pretty vital for me and the way that I play.
Yeah.
Rule of cool, rule of fun, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
While still keeping enough structure that it's fair, right? I don't want to let one character get away with all these things and then somebody else, I'm like, no, you're actually limited by the rules. Like,
Yeah.
But
Sure.
I'm definitely still adding to that series because really, I think the heart of it was I realized I was getting the same questions from other parents over and over again of like, okay, I've played D&D or Pathfinder or something like that. What do you do differently with younger kids?
Right.
And I was like, well, a lot of things. Some things that I don't even really think about as being different. It's just kind of like it's what worked, so we went with it. So that series was more of a way to like answer some of the like frequently asked questions that I got from other parents and to really like consolidate kind of in my own mind more of like, what am I actually doing differently here?
Right. Yeah. That's cool.
And I think one of the harder parts, or at least I think is going to be a harder part for me as my son grows. So when he started, it was super simplified. I told you we had 3 stats. And we had no character sheets. We didn't have like, you have to think about money or you have to think about, occasionally I would have him roll a skill, but I would just come up with it off the top of my head. I'm like, okay, we need an acrobatics, roll a D6. If it's above 4, you pass, whatever.
Right.
And for me, I think what's going to be interesting is like, as he moves up to wanting to do full-fledged, the whole, D&D Beyond with all the stats and stuff, kind of moving him to that. I don't know, maybe it'll be easier than I thought. Maybe he'll just one day be like, you know what? I know we've done this, but I've seen this and I know there's a lot more. I want to do the full thing, and it'll just be just like a chunk and it's there, maybe. And I think maybe with my one son, that could be something. If he has friends and they're at different levels, that could be something different and how that would look. But I haven't thought through that yet.
Yeah. Nicole, has like for you and your kind of journey with that, has there been a shift of I know you said you've like kind of grabbed pieces of things and then made it your own. So have you seen like that kind of like a progression through things where you have changed like rules, in that?
Yeah, so
Mhm.
and it's definitely still in process for
Mm.
me, but I think that in theory, my idea of what I'm doing long term with the way that I do these games is that every time my players level up,
Mm.
they get like one more little piece that gets them closer to what would be like traditional D&D 5e.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
like
yeah.
for example, level 1, they start with like one spell or one attack. They only have that one choice. And
Mhm.
that's okay because they're learning how to play. So it's
Right.
okay that when they get in these little fights, they just do the same thing over and over again. They're
Yeah.
actually not even bored by that because
Yeah.
they're still trying to figure out the
Right.
mechanics.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then, like, okay, we get enough experience, which I don't track because that's hard. But I decide it's time to be level 2. Like, you leveled up, good job.
I'll give you a little
Same.
secret. We still do that
Yeah.
as like with a real table. It's like you feel like you've done
Okay,
enough to
good.
get to the next level, you're there.
Yeah, like that felt like a really big accomplishment.
Yeah.
Congrats, you're
Yep.
level 2 now.
Exactly.
Yep.
But yeah, like maybe they get like one extra ability or spell or
Mm.
something. And usually the way I do that is I will prepare 2 options and
Mhm.
I'll say, your character leveled up. You get to choose whether you can now do this or this.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And if they're interested in both of them, I'll still make them pick, but I'll like keep the other one in my head for level
Yeah.
3. So level 3, like that'll be an option again.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's cool. Even like, I think the process of choosing, is like a helpful thing for them too. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's definitely way too intimidating to say like, okay, I'm a wizard. I'm going from like level 1 to level 2. What's the spell I want to choose from this list
Right.
of like 300 spells? Like, no, a 5-year-old
Yep.
cannot do that.
Right.
This or this,
Sometimes
like
even
fire or ice.
Yeah.
sometimes
Right.
our age, you're like, oh my goodness, how many spells are there to choose from? I've got
Yeah.
to read every one of these. It's going to take me till 4 a.m. just
Yeah.
to get a good overview. Unless you're a person who's just like, I pick, and you put your finger down on something.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had one email come in for what typically is our like haversack that we do at the end of, but I wanted to do that like in this kind of portion of the
Kind of
episode because
mix it in.
mix this in. So it's actually a 4-part set of questions here that we can all weigh in on, but I'd definitely love to hear what you have to say, Nicole, more than what I have to
Matthew.
say. I want to hear Matthew too. But so this is from Evan Bright. This is the Haversack Questions Next Gen edition. And the first one is so in a level-based system which incentivizes violence with XP, what are some non-violent behaviors or achievements to use as an alternative XP reward system for kids? I read that kind of weird, but hopefully that made sense. There it is on the screen.
Yeah, I get it. I think like, alternatives to violence, right? Like I usually have an option for my players to complete a like quest without
Mm,
any kind of violence.
yeah.
Not what they
Yeah.
usually choose. That's just my little murder hobos that I have at my table. But it's always an option. Make a friend or like find, the tavern keeper's son. You rescue him, and now he's back home with his family. Like I feel like there's a lot of ways to complete a like mission or quest that doesn't have to necessarily end in like a big let's beat up the bad guy fight that I would use.
And so when I first started with my kids, I kind of was not going into the let's beat everybody up idea, which my son kind of went there on his own after watching enough superhero stuff. He always wanted to beat up. But like at the beginning, very much it would be like you come up on it just seems like this roaring dragon who's tearing things up, but you notice that there's a thorn in their foot or something. And then it becomes like this idea of how do we like befriend and calm
Mm,
down this thing, which was the first few. It was only for a few sessions that really happened before my son's like, and then there's this beast and we have to vanquish it. It's like, okay. But
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that idea is like worthwhile even if we're talking about like adult games too, of having those options of I feel like there's some times when it's like the big bad guy who's trying to end the world, we need to do something about maybe, but like there like in just like your and maybe there's other ways to deal with that too, but the I could use that more in just my normal games of what are some other options that could be put in front of the players, to do this. So that is a good question there.
and
Um,
again, I never keep track of XP, but like the idea of like them talking, persuading, that sort of stuff with characters, it's really
mhm.
good for them also in the idea of learning how to persuade in general.
Yeah,
Instead of
right,
just
right.
like, I want this, they have to start thinking, okay, what would be reasons that this other person would want to do that for you? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, right.
Let's kind of move from me centric to other people centric. And that,
Mhm.
I think there is growth. It's one of the things I've always thought is that gaming can be a very good developmental tool when used
Yeah,
in the proper ways to help your kids understand things they're going to have to do in the world later
for sure,
themselves.
for sure.
Hopefully not kill, beasts and stuff, but the other
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah,
uh,
there's so many opportunities there to like build some of that. I mean, I guess it's like social empathy, right? It's like,
Hmm.
mhm.
okay,
Yeah,
you show up and this character is mad. Do you know why he's mad? Why don't
right.
you
Yeah,
ask him? Why don't you ask
yeah.
him why he's mad? What
Hmm.
happened?
Hmm.
Oh, that's his problem? Do you think there's a way that maybe you could cheer him up or help him fix his problem?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
don't have to
often,
just be like, he's mad, let's kill him.
right. And often they will want to help fix whatever's going
Yeah,
on, whatever that is. Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Uh, my my son is commenting. I don't know if you've been keeping up with this. So just going back a little bit, Jimmy Kneecaps exclamation point. That was our NPC that they adopted. He was this castle guard that they decided they wanted to take under their wings, and his name ended up being Jimmy Kneecaps. But Milo, we will play D&D again soon, I promise. Rat King says
Oh,
milestone for the win, in our comments about XP and tracking and stuff like that. So, second question here from Evan. For kids not quite ready to read, what can be used to visually remind them of their character traits or special powers, or like specific things to help them remember those?
yeah. Really, the best thing I've found is to use a character sheet that has like symbols on it.
Hmm.
Um, where do you get that is a great question. There are like some of the games that are already like pre-written adventures for kids. Like I'm thinking of like No Thank You Evil and Hero Kids and stuff
Hmm.
like that. They do have symbols on their character sheets. I am almost finished with creating the character sheets. I need to tweak them a little bit more, but
Oh, cool.
mine, I have a simplified character sheet that I'm going to be putting out as a free resource probably here in the next few weeks that does
Hmm.
have symbols and it's very simplified and easy for kids that are non-readers yet.
Hmm.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
And I
That's
don't
great.
know how this would go, but it might go with a character sheet that had the space for it. But when I was starting with my kids, we have a plexiglass over table over the little squares because I'm
Right.
such a
Yeah.
nerd that I have a big table with squares with plexiglass over it that we used to play on.
Hmm.
That's what my kids and I'd play on, and we had the little dry erase markers, and I would tell them before they start, okay, say they have 3 spells. I'd be like, okay, you have 3 spells, your glowing eyes spell, your levitation spell, and your plant growing spell, whatever it is. I want you to draw a little representation of each of those right beside you
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
can remember those. And they enjoyed that creative part as much as almost as much as the playing, but
Yeah.
they loved expressing themselves as far as, and then every time I could be like, okay, look at your 3 spells you have there. And they just drew them on the table right next to themselves. And they can be
That's
like,
cool.
okay, I choose glowing eyes, which whatever glowing eyes does, maybe it mesmerizes. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they could easily look down
Yeah.
and know these are my spells, no reading involved, but they also got to help in kind of like thinking through what's that symbol going to look like because of what does it do? it was a good
Yeah,
connection.
that is super cool.
I like that. I'm gonna borrow that and credit you.
You don't have to credit me at all. I'm sure I stole it from somewhere. Knowing me.
Third question, kind of in similar lines, but for kids not quite ready to math, what can you recommend as an alternative random success fail generator than roll a 1d20 plus modifier?
Well, this is kind of similar to what Matthew was saying earlier, what he did with his kids, but like maybe you have, let's say, like a D12 and a D20. I'm assuming you're a nerd and you have a whole full set of dice. So maybe for the things that they're like good at or proficient at, they get to roll the D20, and for the things that they're just normal at, they get to roll the D12, and like the passing number is always 6, right? So you don't have to do any math. If you are good at it, you use the 20-sided. If you're not good at it, you use the 12-sided. If you get a 6 or more, you pass.
That's really cool.
That's really good.
Yeah,
I think I've forgotten I'd done that once with the idea of I think I had a 12, an 8, and a 6. They love the different shaped dice, by the way. Kids
don't we all?
Like, oh, who wants to stick with just squares when you have all these shapes, right?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of like I would set them beside their. So I think I said I had like strength, smart, speed, and I would give them a +1, +2, +3. One other time we did those 3 skills, but they had each of those dice, and they choose to put one beside each one.
Right.
Because of that, if their character is smart, they get to roll the D12 on that one, and if their character is not strong at all, that's the D6. And so that's a good idea.
Yeah, I was trying to think on this question a little bit, and I was thinking like really, really basic. You could even you'd have to kind of find this dice, but even if it was like 2 different color dice, if you get green, you win. You succeed. If you're red, it's a fail kind of thing. Or I think it'd be
that dice.
You could make that die. That's right. That's right. That's right. You could just like make that up for them. I also like we've talked a bunch on this podcast. One of my favorite games is a game called Red Markets, and what it does is you have a red and a black die, and you add your modifiers to the black. You want to be in the black, not in the red, to succeed. And I wonder about like even that kind of thing of doing like an opposed dice roll where you roll the 2. If the one color is over the other color, then I think you could figure out some different ways depending on the level of the kid too, even with dealing with numbers to make that work. So those are good ideas.
When they're in high school, they have to actually roll the dice and take the square root of it over the discipline of the sine and the cosine. You make them do their algebra.
I'm out.
This calculus equation to find out what that
right. And then they're like, okay, I got this. Did I succeed? And you're like, yeah, probably. Sure. I don't know.
Oh man. Final question here. When you are the player's caregiver and they make a morally dubious choice for their character, what is a good way and when is a good time to turn that into a teachable moment? Kind of talked about teachable moments earlier, but this is a little bit different spin on that.
Yeah. It's definitely a like, are you sure you want to do that kind of moment? I mean, if they are, then probably I would make there be some kind of consequence to that I know they're not going to like, because that sort of mirrors life, right? If you make a morally dubious choice in life, sometimes something happens after that you don't like.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So typically, again, I don't mean to keep bringing up my son because my daughter also likes to play, but my son typically is the one who's like a little more like a ram in there. And, he's the quicker one to maybe, he also has a really soft heart, which is the conundrum of it. But so typically I try to not let it get to a place where the dubiously moral decision is made. I try to say, you can go in and there's lots of things you can do, but it seems like maybe you could even persuade, or you could, I'll offer some options and then he can like think okay, there's more than one way to do this, and then often he'll choose correct way. But if he did something that was, you know, morally questionable, that idea of like, oh, and so you did this, but like that is against the kingdom rules, and so you've been taken and put in jail, and so now you're going to have to be in here for, you know, I don't know, this many rounds or something like that. That could be.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
I like that. Or maybe some kind of social consequence, like, oh, you were really a jerk to, I don't know, this owl, and now all the forest birds don't like you,
Yeah,
And
and
right.
they
then
will not
yeah,
help you, and they
Yeah.
might
yes,
attack you if you walk under their trees.
right.
I like
Now
that.
you're an
Then-
enemy of the forest fowl.
as long as then they don't turn into,
love it.
I'm going to kill every bird I see. You're like, no.
Favorite enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. So we mentioned earlier you have a book, working on a
Yeah.
book.
Working on a book.
Yeah. Would you care to share a little more of that, if you're willing to?
Sure, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
happy to.
Sweet.
It's really the way this book came about was it's a book that I kind of looked for as a parent and couldn't find. There is a pretty huge lack of tabletop fantasy D&D-ish picture books for kids. There's quite a few good early reader series, like early chapter books, but as far as like bedtime stories that are fully illustrated, there's only a handful. There's like a few that Wizards of the Coast put out that's like ABCs of D&D, 1, 2, 3s of D&D,
Yeah.
and a few little golden books
Hmm.
about you know, some of the D&D characters and stuff
Right.
like that. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot available. And I kept looking and looking and asking
Yeah.
people and just not really finding what I wanted. And so I just hooked up with a really great artist and decided to make our own.
That's awesome.
So
It's that same idea of like you write the book that you want to read that nobody has written, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I
Yeah.
kept looking for books. I couldn't find them. So I'm like, I'm going to make one.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where it was born from. And it's kind of loosely based on my family and me playing with my two
Yeah.
kids. In this fantasy world that I created of Etheria, which is also the same fantasy world for the tabletop game that I'm
Yeah,
putting
cool.
out. So what I hope happens is that people will buy the book and enjoy reading the story of these kids who basically play D&D
Yeah.
and are immersed in this like fun fantasy world, and then that will give them sort of the introduction scaffolding to like, oh, this is a thing that you can do, you can play role-playing games and it's fun. And then once they're a little older, you know, maybe 4, 5, 6, they can pick up the tabletop game that has the same characters, the
Right.
same world, a lot of the same creatures and locations, and it'll already feel kind of familiar to them
That's cool.
from the background of reading this book as a child, as a bedtime story.
That's
And
awesome.
I think there are, as much as kind of appealing to the children, I think appealing to the parents. What I mean by that is, so you have some people like us who, okay, we started doing this at some point in our lives and we feel very comfortable doing this. But there are a lot of parents I know who feel like, I don't understand any of that. It's like whenever we have a new player coming into our game, they're like, oh, I kind of want to play. I've heard about that, but I don't know anything. It's just so much. And it can be overwhelming. And so for parents to realize, okay, I don't have to start with all of that. I can start in a very simple place. And sometimes maybe they just need to know that those kinds of resources are out there.
Yeah,
It's
for
like,
sure.
okay, this is something that I can do. And also, the nice thing is, I think at this day and age, it's no longer like a feared thing. Like, oh, this is a really scary, dangerous thing. Like back in the 80s when I was a kid, they thought that this was, if you did this, oh no, Satanism and everything. But now they understand that there's a great world of fantasy out there through seeing stuff like Lord of the Rings and not just that, but like all of the fantasy stuff, the Harry Potter and everything that's out there. There's a place for this. And so I do think that being able to speak to parents and give them the idea that, hey, there's a resource out here that you can understand that you can do with your kids, as well as the kids being excited about that is very important.
For sure. That's cool. So if we were going to keep an eye out on this, do you have like a time frame, and like where would we look for like the releases of these things?
Yeah, that great question. Time frame is still slightly up in the air. I was hoping to have at least the picture book out by the end of this year. I don't know if we're going to make that cutoff because we're still in illustration right now.
Right.
So I'll have a better idea of the exact launch date and timeline once we've actually gone to print.
For sure. Yeah.
But, probably if not end of this year, first quarter of next year should be when the book's coming out. And then the core game book for the game will come out probably shortly after, within a month or two.
Yeah, cool.
And if you let us know, we'll keep everybody on here posted.
Yeah.
We'll make that announcement when it happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you're on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook, those are probably the best ways to keep up with me. And I'll obviously keep announcing stuff about the book and the progression there. I also have a newsletter that you can sign up for, and my website is just GameMasterMom.com, all one word.
Nice.
So you can see the link to the newsletter, and eventually the products will be for sale on that site, and also on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll be sure to continue to share that as we go on and get those connected to our people. I'm going to go ahead and read there's one more haversack that we got, and it's not really a question, but I thought it was interesting. It kind of connects in this realm. So this is from Cole Anderson. The email is episode 55, RPGs with Kids. Hello, Adam, Matthew, and Nicole. I'm sending this ahead of time, so maybe you'll already have talked about it, but I wanted to offer up Mouse Ritter, and it's mouseritter.com, as a good system for kids. You play brave mice in a dangerous world. The art and imagination is fun. Needles as swords, buttons as bucklers, etc. It's rules light, so you get up and running quick. You can be run in a pretty conversational way. It's also a neat inventory system where everything you pick up is to actually fit in your inventory slots. It's a really nice box set, but the base rule book is on itch.io, which is nice. He included a picture of his son's short-lived first character. I'll have to put that on socials because it's amazing, if that's okay with Cole. And it's Mousy the Poor, who climbed a sunflower to try to break into a barn, but was unceremoniously knocked off to his demise by a confused bee. Cheers, Cole. That sounds like an awesome game.
Of my sorts of campaign.
I love it. So I appreciate Cole sending that in. I'll have to check out Mouse Ritter also. So, but I appreciated the demise of his character. So it was good stuff. Well, thanks. Thanks so much for being on, Nicole. We're going to go ahead and I think move to our NPC to kind of finish the episode here. But we really appreciate you being on and sharing about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Adam, you're reading the NPC this week,
That's right? Me. Yep.
All right. Let's hear it.
All right. So this is also a Gnome Stew thing that we read from. It's called Masks is the book. But this is Miss Iona Blunn, the tough con artist. Her appearance, makeup and good grooming help hide the passing years. Mostly it's her bearing and close attention to finery that maintains her attractive appearance. In manner, she mostly appears deferential to her lady. From time to time, Iona lets out an exasperated expression. Her personality is that in spite of a demure exterior, Iona's tough-as-nails operator is more than willing to endure even the most disagreeable employer to get what she wants. She can effectively charm, wheedle, cajole, bully, or intimidate others when she needs to. She's motivated. She likes to gain a position as a lady's companion, earn her trust, and eventually find a way to help herself to a portion of the lady's wealth without being caught. She was born to a well-to-do family and received a finishing school education, but has been on her own after a scandalous divorce. With a partner, usually one of a series of lovers, she travels about seeking positions as a lady's companion to run her con. Outwardly, she serves that role competently. Privately, she's always probing, trying to learn her employer's secrets. So this is Miss Iona Blunn. What would you do with that?
I have no idea what I would do with this character. I think whether I was playing this with like our regular table or if I was playing this with my kids, since we're kind of focusing on what is it like for RPG kids, I think the whole thing with this is you have to somehow, in the way you act it out, let them know that this person is only trying to act like a good servant because they're trying to take they're on the take. So you're going to show that this person is not loyal, this person is not to be trusted. And maybe it's one of those cases where they thinking the PCs would be in on it, like let them in on the idea that, oh, this person doesn't know anything, I'm getting a good button. Somehow it's going to be a distrusted person because just the way they act, the way they do this. Whether again in just our regular game, it would have to be somehow. I would have to let them know, but I don't know what I would do with a person like this as an NPC. I would have to have a very specific reason, and right now, for some reason, I don't have one in the top of my mind.
Yeah, this is one for me that you have to. There has to be a reveal at some point, because it could just be random lady that you come across who serves a noble woman, kind of thing, and then they just see her and then move on. It's like all that interior stuff is really hard to show, so it's almost one of those that they hear about this person. In my I don't know if that it's like a rumor or something that they've heard about before they actually engage with the person, because otherwise it's kind of all lost on the players. I don't know if that makes sense, but anything come up for you, Nicole?
Yeah, I'm thinking kind of something similar along the lines of that. Like, it would be probably before they met this character, I would have them hear a rumor from some kind of source that they already trust, maybe somebody who's given them like tips or rumors before. And then when they meet her, I don't know, I'd have to find some kind of ways to make her sort of obviously suspicious, because especially the kids that I tend to play with, they just believe people.
Right.
They hardly ever even think to roll for deception check or something. Like, is this really what's going on? They're just like, okay.
Yeah. For sure.
I'd have to really kind of spell it out. Like, okay, you heard about this person, matches the description perfectly, and is acting kind of shady.
Yeah, for sure.
Or it'd have to be in the way you act. That I keep getting this like some Disney sort of thing in my head, and I can't think of what it is that's trying to intrude on my memory here, but something where it's like, for some reason I keep thinking of Jafar in Aladdin, the little bird. I can't even remember the name, but
Iago.
Yeah, Iago. But where it's like, oh, let me help you, sir. And then, if somebody has a hype, you say, oh, you need to roll a perception, and they roll, and they see him slip some, or in Robin Hood, when they're like, oh, let me kiss your princely fingers, and they take the gems.
Yeah.
There has to be something that they see, maybe that the rest of them don't.
Nobody
And they get this idea. It's like, oh, this is one of those people who are acting like a friend who's not, acting like the servant, but that's not.
For sure.
Disney does that pretty well. So I have to
yeah.
probably watch a few Disney movies and get a inspiration.
Yeah. I couldn't get my brain out of, there's a Downton Abbey character at some point, and it's like a lady's maid who is, she's like in a relationship with the guy who's acting like he's going to marry one of the people, and then they have this whole con going on. I don't know if anybody remembers any of this stuff, and I
Nope.
am surprised that I'm quoting Downton Abbey today, but the
I haven't seen it. It sounds great.
okay. Well, sorry for the spoiler. But I can only think of those people like in this, especially when it's, talking about like she has a partner, usually one of a series of lovers, and traveling about seeking this. Like it's like they're working together to make this con. And I just wondered about like either maybe they're hired to track down this person. It's like there's a noblewoman who got conned, and she's like, I want you to find this person and get back the family diamonds that were stolen by my old lady's maid because she ran off with them. And she also had this other person with her that was always around, and you need to find them. And that leading to maybe a quest that can be a journey plus, whatever else comes kind of thing. Or maybe she's a good source of information. It talked about trying to always learn these employers' secrets. Maybe she's been imprisoned, and it's one of those like Hannibal Lecter things where you got to go talk to the person in jail and like, get the info about how to catch somebody else or something. I don't know. Those things like came to mind for me with her, but in general, I think she would be a hard one to just like on the street. You get all this information, for whether it's kids or adults in that way. So,
Well, there
thoughts
we
on
are.
Iona?
None
No.
from me.
Cool.
So,
Yeah.
hey, we are so glad, Nicole, that you could join us today.
Yeah, for sure.
And,
Thank you.
Again, we're going to put her contact information and stuff in our socials so that if you didn't pick that up in conversation today, you have a way to find that. But I think that's going to do it for us today here on Rise of the GM. And we want you to keep an eye out for her stuff. Join us next week. What are we talking about next week, Adam?
Next week, we're going to talk about when we have completed a campaign, how to debrief those things and kind of deal with epilogues and such.
So join us next week for that. And we'll see you guys then. Thanks for joining us here today on Rise of the GM. See you later.
See y'all.